So, hi everyone, welcome to the Grafana community call. First, some general notes. This webinar is being recorded and recording will be available on YouTube, so we assume you are fine with that. And questions are welcome at any time during the call. So, today we are talking about the observability logs and traces squad and what we worked on, what is noteworthy as such. These are people involved in the squad. We generally work on anything logs and traces related, like be it some data sources like Tempo or Loki, also on visualizations like the logs visualizations or the traces visualizations or anything similar. Right.
So hey everyone, my name is Ivana, and within the logs and traces squad, I focus mostly on logs. And last couple of months, I've been working on Loki Query Builder, Loki and Prometheus Query Builder. And so I would like to show you, do a little demo of this Query Builder. So if you will move to the next slide and play the video. So here we have a new Query Builder that was released in Grafana 9. We have added at the top this new two sections. First one is explain and the second one is builder. So now we are in builder mode. And when we talk to Loki users and our community, we've heard that usually when you start to write the query, you start with selecting your log stream, which means specifying label and values. So that's what we put on the top. So you can start from the top and then move to the operations. To add operations, you can either click on this operations button, or my favorite part is query patterns, which are kind of like a Kickstarters for your query. So you can browse through templates, and if there is something that works for you and you click on it, multiple operations are added for you based on the purpose. So in this case, I wanted to do log query with parsing and filtering, and it added these 4 operations for me. I can then go through the operations and modify them if needed, or change the values if that's not what I'm looking for. So that's what I'm doing here. I decided to filter for level label that has error value. And you can run the query. If you decide to add more operations, so you can add as many as you want, you can then just continue by clicking on the operation button. You can choose from like operations that are for metrics query, or continue with operations for log query. So here I'm adding rate and sum. And again, if I would want to, I can go and modify the queries right into these operations. So this one is the builder section, but we have also added the explain section. And explain section is very useful for the cases when you would like to learn more about your query, or maybe your teammates wrote the query that you are not sure what exactly does it do. So here, operation by operation, we add documentation of what each specific operation do. And we kept the code mode. So if you are a pro Loki users and are fluent in LockQL, you can write your queries here. Cool thing, or very nice thing, is that we have, as a part of this project, added parser or created parser, and which means that you can switch between these 3 modes without losing the query, and we basically just store query as a string and then visualize it in the different forms. So here I am changing query in code editor, I move to builder, and the changes are still here. So they were applied. So this is query builder. I have a slide after it that highlights kind of my favorite things about this project. So if you would move to the next slide. And it's hard because sometimes when you click here, it just plays the video again. It happened to me the last time. So my favorite, one of the favorite things is that we have finally unified query editor for Explore and for Dashboard. So we have one editor that is used for both of these use cases. We have added query patterns, and that's also something that we would like to improve on. The explain section, and also we have published a laser lock URL package. So if you are lock users and you are maybe building your own query builder, you can use it there as well. So it's available for our community. So that's Query Builder, which is part of Grafana 9. And here is a little preview of what we are currently working on right now. So query hints that we are going to see work in a way where we run very small, very fast queries while you are writing your query, analyze the data, so in this case, logs, and based on that, create suggestions. So for example, in this case, we learned that the logs are in JSON format, so we can offer JSON parser. We also got information from the logs that there are some pipeline errors, so we were able to offer this hint that is basically applicable for your log lines that you would get. And the last slide that I have is related to what query hints do we support, and maybe if some plugins developers are here or are watching this, maybe kind of like intro what we use or how did we create these hints. So we have hints for parser and pipeline errors, that's what we could see, and also for renaming of level-like labels. So if your level label has name LBL or error level, this is problematic for log volumes because your graph suddenly doesn't have these colors and doesn't have differences, like it cannot see what are the levels. So we are in this case offering a hint that renames your level-like label to level, and that way you have nice colors in your log volumes. So how did we create it? We rely on two data source methods that are part of data source API. First one is get query hint, where we supply query and samples. It can be the results or sample data and produce query hint. And then when users click on query hints, we use modify query method that takes this query fix action that comes from query hint and creates a new query. So it's also very possible to use this if you are developing different kind of plugins and would like to do these hints. And that's it from me, and I'm passing it to Joey.
Thanks, Ivana. Hey folks, how are things? Today I want to tell you about the traces panel and the APM table. So first of all, the traces panel, available from Grafana 9.0, allows you to view your traces in a dashboard. And the reason that we wanted to do this was because Explorer is very handy for getting an idea of what your data is doing, but of course it's not saved. You have to keep the tab open. But if you want to have easy access to your queries over time, and indeed to use template variables, you'll want to use them in a dashboard. So now you can add your traces panel to a dashboard. It's currently in beta, and you can add your variables for whatever fields you want, so that you can basically save your dashboards and come back to those queries later as quickly as possible. Something else that I've been working on is the APM table. And the whole idea behind this application performance management table is to allow you to get APM data out of the box without having to do some extra setup or take time out of your busy day to get it working. Essentially, this is provided more or less for free through the tempo metrics generator. Basically, that scans your incoming traces and generates metrics from them, which it then stores in Prometheus through remote write. What does this allow you to do? Well, essentially, it allows you to view your red span metrics. So you can see your request rate, which of those are erroring out, and the duration of those requests as well. So you can figure out perhaps your P90, 95, 99, figure out the slowest queries and do something with them. So the table is a top 5, of course. And we wanted the table to be as easy to use as possible and as small as possible. So that's why we went with only 5 results. But in order to make it easy to use, we added links as well. So your rate column, and I'll show you in a moment in the video, your rate, and error rate, and duration columns all have links that will take you directly to Prometheus. With the query filled in for you, exemplars turned on in the case of the duration metric, and as well, we've added a link to tempo to take you straight from the table so that you can search for the particular service name. And of course, you can filter results as well. So if you want to search by server, service, and other metrics as well, you can do that, and it'll filter the table and the service graph for you. So on the video here, you can see we have a couple of columns. I'm clicking on the rate column here, opens up the query in Prometheus for you. The error rate does the same, but fills in the error for you as well. And the duration, of course, will fill in the query. And you can also make use of exemplars, going straight to the trace. You can hit the tempo link, which will open up tempo for you. And you can also add filters. Once a query is run after the filter is entered, you'll see that it updates the service graph for you. Remove the query and the filter, run the query, table is updated again, shows everything because there's no filter. So of course, the filter is just a handy way to drill down into the metrics or APM data that you're interested in. And that's all, folks. Any questions? I suppose we take them at the end.
Hey, another feature that we've been working on the trace side of things is trace to metrics. So we currently support linking between various signals, metrics, logs, and traces through features like trace to logs, logs to traces, exemplars, and kind of the missing link was to be able to jump between traces to metrics. So whereas an exemplar, for example, would take you from an aggregated metric to a trace, which is a very specific instance that contributed to that metric, trace metrics will do the opposite. You're looking at a trace, a very specific example, and you see that a span is 100 milliseconds, for example, which seems like maybe it's a lot longer than normal, but you don't have a clear picture because you're looking at a single data point. With trace to metrics, you could link a P90 latency based on the span name, for example. You could click on the link, and then you could see that aggregated data to see whether or not that span duration kind of is anomalous, if it's normal. And so it just gives you a different view into your data. So this will live inside the trace view alongside some of the other links that we have, like trace to logs, as well as span references. So if we go to the next slide, we'll see what the configuration looks like for this. Similarly to trace to logs, you're going to select a data source that you're linking to, and then you're going to configure tags. These tags are a mapping between the span attribute names and the metric label names that you want to filter your metrics based off of. Because there's some incompatibility between how Tempo accepts attributes versus, for example, Prometheus labels naming conventions, you have the option to map between them. For example, you look at the first tag, the span attribute value is kates.pod. That has a period in it, which would be an invalid Prometheus label. So you map that to pod, which would be the value on your metric, for example. That gives you a little bit of flexibility there. After you've configured your tags, you then create the metrics that you want to have included in the links. So you have some descriptive label that tells you what metric you're linking to, and then you write out the query with a special keyword in there, which is $, $_, tags. And that will interpolate the values from the tags that you've selected into the query at runtime. So I'll dynamically look up the values on the span, insert it into the metrics query so that you are looking at the data that is correlated to that span. So for example, you click on one of the spans and it will look up kates.pod and it'll put in the pod name into your metrics label so that you're seeing the latency or the error rate for exactly that pod or cluster, whatever tags that you have configured. This will be coming out in 9.1. as opposed to trace to logs, there are a lot of edge cases in how you're going to be writing your queries. And so excited to get feedback and see the different scenarios that all our users are going to want to use this in. So we'll likely be making changes as we get that feedback in coming releases so that it can be a bit more flexible as to the way that you are writing your queries, selecting tags, maybe mapping between different data sources. That's it for trace metrics.
So next, we'd like to talk about some of the larger breaking changes happening in Grafana 9 related to our squad, maybe give some explanations why they happened and how they happened. There are two important changes that happened. One is the Loki data format change, and also the some old versions of Elasticsearch are not supported anymore in Elasticsearch data source. Regarding the Loki data format change, the problem was efficiency. Generally, as data flows through Grafana, we package them into containers called data frames, and the problem is that usually you expect when you run a query to get back like 1-2 data frames, but it's Loki. Sometimes it happened that every log row became its own container. It was very inefficient, so we changed this to a better format. In general, as long as you look at your logs using the logs visualization, for example, you are in Explore, nothing really changes. Everything works as before. But if you load this data into, for example, a table panel and a dashboard, there will be changes. Adjustments has to be made. The change log contains more information about this. The other change is the Elasticsearch support for old versions, which generally we supported very old Elasticsearch database versions, and this was not manageable anymore. So we decided to only support the newer versions. We looked around, and it turns out that Elastic, the company, already maintains a list of which database versions they support and which they do not. And we simply use that list. At this point, it should be 7.11, the oldest version we support.
Yeah, thank you. Now I want to talk about a bit about what's next. So we have two major topics in the next slide. Basically, we have those two spaces, logs and traces. And in the log space, we will do some more improvements in the logs explore. And basically, all those improvements are from the UX research. So, for example, we will move the downloads button to download your logs from Explore, move it one layer up so you will easily find this button, for example. Then, second thing, Ivana already showed the hints in the local query builder, but we are obviously looking into implementing more hints. And if you have ideas, the next slide will be interesting for that, but we come to that in a bit. Then in our logs space, we have two external data sources for Splunk and for OpenSearch. And yeah, we will also do some improvements and some bug fixing in those data sources. Regarding the traces space, we will focus mainly on tempo and especially there on the trace view, but also on service graph improvements. And also in traces, we have an external data source, Sentry, and Sentry recently did some changes and additions to their own APIs, and we will follow up with those API changes in our external data source. Yeah, then on the next slide, to call to actions, basically. So if you have any ideas or feature requests, feel free to click the link on the left, which will bring you to the GitHub page of the Grafana repository, especially in the discussions topic there. And feel free to just open up any issue or open up any discussion item so we can follow up on feature requests there. Then the second thing is we have still like a user research, especially regarding the Loki query builder ongoing. So if you are a Loki user and use the query builder, or not use the query builder, but use the Loki data source in Grafana, feel free to reach out to us via the link on the right, which is basically just a Google form, but we can then get in contact with you. Yeah, that's it from my side. And basically now we are heading over to question and answers.
Yes, so any questions, anyone? Let me check. Nope. Well, in case, thank you for watching this presentation, and turn back again when the next community call happens. See you next time.
Thank you.